If I'm honest, I didn't feel afraid when I first decided to surprise my husband. I felt hopeful. I wanted to see that spark in his eyes again, the one he used to have whenever he spotted me waiting for him. So I got up early, packed his favorite coffee in a thermos, and drove to the marina, thinking it would be a sweet, ordinary moment between us. A small reminder that love could still feel simple, even in a life as complicated and polished as his. But the moment I stepped onto the dock, something inside me tightened. Not panic, just a quiet shift, like my instincts leaning forward to listen. The air felt heavier than it should, colder than it had been on the drive. The fog clung low to the water, rolling in slow sheets that swallowed every shape around me. I kept telling myself I was being dramatic, that the silence was normal for this early in the morning. Yet each step I took made the feeling grow stronger. A faint pressure in my chest, the kind that whispers, "Pay attention." His boat should have been there. It was always there. That sleek silver hull, that polished rail he was so proud of, but the slip where Harbor Light usually rested was empty, the water rippling gently as if something big had left only moments ago. I stared at the vacant space longer than I should have, trying to convince myself I'd missed something obvious. Maybe he left early. Maybe he didn't tell me because he wanted real solitude. That would make sense. That should have made sense. And yet, something wouldn't settle. I called his phone. Voicemail. I tried one of the crew members. No answer. The feeling in my stomach twisted, subtle but insistent, like a hand quietly closing around my ribs. I took another step down the dock, trying to shake it off, and that's when I noticed the figure standing near the end. An older man, shoulders hunched against the cold, his jacket soaked like he'd been caught in a storm that hadn't touched the rest of the coast. He wasn't doing anything, just watching the water with a stillness that felt out of place. When he heard my footsteps, he turned. His face was lined, tired in a way that went deeper than age, and when our eyes met, I felt the first true flicker of fear. Not because of him, but because of what I saw reflected in his expression. Something like dread, softened by sympathy. He walked toward me slowly, as if approaching a wound he didn't want to reopen. And when he spoke, his voice was low, almost apologetic. "You're looking for the man on the silver boat, aren't you?" I nodded, hoping he would tell me something simple, something harmless. But instead, he slipped a small, rusted key into my hand, metal cold enough to sting. "Go home," he whispered. "Don't follow him today." For a moment, neither of us moved. The fog curled around the edges of the dock, the wind carrying a faint smell. Bleach, salt, something metallic I couldn't place. I looked down at the key, at the number scratched into it like someone had carved it in a hurry, and a shiver rolled through me so quietly it almost felt like part of the breeze. When I looked up again, the man was already walking away, his figure dissolving into the gray morning. And there I was, standing alone on the dock, holding a key I didn't recognize, listening to the echo of a warning I didn't understand, and realizing with slow, sinking certainty that whatever my husband was doing on his peaceful fishing trip, my unexpected arrival was never supposed to be part of it. The moment the old fisherman disappeared into the fog, the world around me suddenly felt too quiet. Quiet in a way that made my skin prickle. I stood there, clutching the rusted key he had forced into my hand, my pulse beating too loudly in my ears. I wasn't ready to move yet. I wasn't ready to breathe. It felt like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare without any warning. I looked down at the key again, turning it slowly between my fingers. The number carved into its side, 27B, had been scratched in with desperate force, the metal slightly warped as if someone had dug it in using the last of their strength. The edges were jagged, the grooves were uneven. It didn't look like a key meant for a peaceful fishing trip. It looked like a key that had survived something violent. A cold wind rolled across the dock, carrying the sharp scent of salt and bleach. That smell again. Too strong, too out of place. My heart gave a small, uneasy kick. I wrapped my arms around myself, partly for warmth, partly to hold myself together, and walked toward the edge of the dock where his boat should have been. The space was still empty, water rippling softly, slapping gently against the wooden pillars like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I whispered his name out loud, half hoping saying it would anchor me. Evan. My voice felt small against the vast gray water stretching out before me. And then, something unexpected broke the stillness, a soft metallic clink. I froze and turned toward the sound. On the planks just a few feet from where I stood, something glinted faintly through the fog. I crouched down slowly, my breath held tight in my chest, and picked it up. It was a broken zipper pull from a jacket I knew too well, his jacket, the one he wore every fishing trip, the one he had hugged me in the night before he left. The metal was warm, too warm, as if someone had been wearing it minutes ago. My fingers tightened around it. My breath stuttered. He had been here, recently, so recently that the warmth of his body still lingered in the metal he dropped. But why drop something? Why leave so suddenly? Why wasn't his crew here? Why was the dock empty? A sound echoed over the water, distant, hollow, like something heavy shifting on a boat I couldn't see. My heart stumbled into a faster rhythm. I stepped closer to the edge, squinting into the fog. The shape of something, large, dark, floated where the mist grew thickest. At first, I thought it might be his boat. I took a hopeful step forward, but then the shape moved. Too smooth, too silent, cutting across the water without lights, without the hum of an engine. My breath tightened. A silhouette of a person stood at the bow, motionless, watching the dock, watching me. Though I couldn't see their face, I felt their gaze, cold, assessing, the kind that makes your instincts scream before your brain can form the thought. The figure raised an arm, not waving, not greeting, just pointing. Right at me. Something in my chest snapped tight, a primal jolt of fear I couldn't explain. The fog shifted, and for a split second, I could have sworn I saw someone else behind him. Another shape, slumped, unmoving, and then, just as quickly as it appeared, the boat drifted backward into the fog, swallowed whole as if it had never existed. I stepped back, almost stumbling, my breath shaking out of me in uneven bursts. My fingers tightened around the rusted key until the jagged metal bit into my skin. Nothing about this trip, nothing about this morning, felt like something I should be part of. But it was too late. The warning, the key, the boat, the watching stranger. They had already pulled me in. And deep down, beneath the fear and the confusion, a quiet realization stirred like a whisper under my ribs. Whatever my husband was doing out there on the water, it wasn't fishing. And whatever I had just witnessed, I wasn't supposed to see. Before the fog, before the key, before the silent boat with its faceless watcher, there had been a time when none of this made sense, when the idea of danger felt distant, impossible, almost laughable. That time was only days ago, yet standing on the dock now, it felt like another lifetime. Back then, when I thought of my husband, the first image that always came to mind was light. Sunlight catching on the gold in his hair, the glow of his smile when he walked through our penthouse doors, the way he lit up a room without even trying. Evan Prescott, the billionaire who somehow had chosen me, the girl who grew up in a 2-bedroom house with thrift store furniture and hand-me-down dreams. He used to look at me like I was the only steady thing in his life, like I was a harbor he could return to. I held on to that look like it was a promise, which was why when he said he needed this fishing trip to clear his mind, I didn't question it. He'd been overwhelmed. 3 mergers collapsing at once, angry investors, endless nights staring at glowing spreadsheets with the kind of exhaustion that sits behind the eyes. I remember touching his cheek that last night, feeling the faint roughness of his stubble, and he leaned into my hand like he was finally home. Just 2 days, he said softly. I just need peace, water, silence. You know how it is. And I nodded. Of course I knew. He'd always loved the water. It was the one place he felt human again, far from the noise of power and money. He kissed me then, slow, unhurried, the kind of kiss that tells you without words, don't worry, everything's fine. I believed him. But now, standing on this cold dock, the broken zipper pull still warm in my pocket, I couldn't stop replaying small moments that suddenly felt wrong. Like the way he'd held me that last night, too tightly, almost lingering, as if he were memorizing the shape of me, or the way he had avoided eye contact right after, brushing it off with a tired laugh, or the faint smell of bleach on his jacket when he hugged me goodbye, a smell I dismissed because wealthy men always had someone cleaning something around them, right? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to breathe through the growing ache in my chest. There had been other moments too, now flooding back in sharp flashes. The gala 2 weeks ago. The beautiful woman in a red dress passing me with a look that wasn't jealousy, but pity. The night Evan came home late, shaking slightly, claiming the cold got into his bones, even though the weather had been warm. The way his phone always went silent when he walked into the penthouse. The way he never let me join him on these trips, always using the same gentle excuse. You'd be bored, sweetheart. But I wouldn't have been bored. I would have gone anywhere with him. And maybe that was the problem. Because as I stood on the dock now, my fingertips tingling with cold and fear, I could finally feel the distance between us. A distance I hadn't noticed while living inside the safety of our beautiful life. Our penthouse, the charity events, the private flights, the tailored suits. All of it had felt like luxury. But now, through the fog of this morning, it looked more like camouflage. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold on to the memory of the love I thought we had. The soft laughter, the late-night confessions, the mornings he brewed my coffee because he said my smile tasted better with caffeine. I wanted that to be real. I needed that to be real. But the rusted key in my hand, the empty slip, the boat in the fog, the man watching me from the water. They whispered a different truth, a truth that told me the life I thought was mine, the marriage I trusted, the man I loved, might have always been balancing on a fault line I never saw. And something deep inside me, something old and instinctive, whispered that once the earth cracks beneath your feet, you don't get to pretend the ground was ever solid. I wasn't born into the kind of world Evan lived in. My childhood wasn't lined with marble floors or ocean view balconies or private tutors teaching foreign languages before breakfast. It was small, quiet, ordinary. A 2-bedroom home with a sagging front porch where the paint chipped every winter and we fixed it every spring. My mother worked double shifts at a diner. My father, before the accident, spent his evenings teaching me how to read constellations from our backyard, pointing out stars that shone through the weak glow of our street lamp. He used to say, when you don't have much, you learn to see everything. Maybe that's why my stomach churned now, because something inside me was finally seeing what it had missed. Growing up, I learned to notice the smallest shifts in people, a quiet strain in their voice, a glance that lingered half a second too long, the way a smile could falter even when everything else stayed the same. It made me intuitive, sensitive, a little too trusting sometimes, but also quick to feel when something wasn't right. That instinct had never been wrong, and right now, it was screaming. I wrapped my jacket tighter around myself as I stood on that cold dock, remembering the person I was before all of this. Before Evan, before penthouses and private islands and dinner parties, filled with people whose names carried weight, like currency. Back then, I spent my days teaching art to kids who colored outside the lines, and my nights painting in the corner of my tiny apartment, dreaming of something softer than survival. Evan had walked into that life like sunlight breaking through a storm. He'd sat beside me at a charity auction I could barely afford to attend, smiling like warmth itself, and asked about the little watercolor I had donated. I expected polite interest, the kind men like him practiced effortlessly. Instead, he had listened, really listened, as I explained the brushstrokes, the colors, the feeling behind them. "That's rare," he said when I finished, "finding someone who still sees the world this way." I didn't know then how much those words would stay with me. I didn't know they would become the basis of everything I believed about him. For a long time, he made me feel safe. Not in the way money secures you, but in the way a person's presence can fill the empty, aching spaces you didn't know you had. When he laughed, it felt like the world was still good. When he held my hand, I believed love could be enough, even in a world full of billionaires, secrets, and silent rooms, where power made decisions before people did. But standing here now with fog curling around my ankles and that rusted key biting into my palm, the woman he loved felt very far away from the woman shivering on this dock. I wasn't naive, not anymore, but I wasn't fearless either. Inside me, fear and love were colliding, two tides crashing together, neither strong enough to overpower the other. I didn't know which part of me would win, the girl who trusted him with her whole heart, or the woman whose instincts whispered that something terrible had already happened. A breeze swept through the marina, lifting loose strands of my hair, and for a moment I imagined my father standing beside me, guiding me like he used to. "When something feels wrong," he always said, "don't look away. Look closer." So I did. I looked at the fog, at the empty slip, at the broken zipper pull warm in my pocket, at the key carved with desperate scratches, at the cold ripple of dread moving through me like a second heartbeat. And I realized something simple and terrifying. I wasn't just searching for my husband anymore. I was searching for the truth about his trip, the truth about his life, the truth about the man I thought I knew. And deep inside me, a quiet, trembling thought formed, one I didn't dare say aloud. What if the truth has been waiting for me to find it? Looking back now, I can see all the signs, little things, small shifts that felt harmless in the moment, but returned to me now like sharp, glinting fragments of truth I chose to step around. They didn't scream, they whispered. And sometimes the whispers are the most dangerous because they're easy to ignore. The first sign was the smell. It clung faintly to his jacket the night before he left. Cleaner, sharper than anything that belonged on a fishing trip. Bleach. I remember hugging him goodbye, pressing my face against his chest, and thinking the scent felt wrong. Too sterile, too clinical. Not like salt water or gasoline or fish scales. The scents that usually followed him after a day on the water. When I asked about it, he laughed it off, saying he'd dropped coffee on himself and someone at the office had cleaned it. But his shirt underneath had been spotless. The second sign was the woman. At the charity gala 2 weeks earlier, she'd walked past me in a crimson dress, her perfume mixing with the scent of champagne and over-polished marble floors. She didn't know me. I didn't know her. Yet when our eyes met across the staircase, something flickered in her expression. Recognition or relief or something darker, something sadder. And then she looked away quickly, too quickly, the way people look away when they see someone walking toward a cliff and can't bear to watch them fall. The third sign was his hands. Evan always had warm hands, steady, confident hands that wrapped around mine like they had every right to be there. But in the last month, they had trembled more than once, slightly, barely noticeable, just enough for me to feel it when he handed me a wine glass or brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. "Just stress," he would say. "I'm fine." But the tremble wasn't stress. It was something heavier, something that felt like a held breath he couldn't release. And the last sign, the one I ignored the most, was the silence. Late at night, when he thought I was asleep, he would stand by the window overlooking the city, staring at something only he could see. The lights of Seattle gleamed below us, reflected in the glass like a constellation of tiny, frantic stars. I would watch the shadow of him, still and tall, his shoulders locked in place. Sometimes he whispered to himself. Sometimes he pressed his palms against the glass like he was trying to feel something real beneath the cold. Once, just once, he'd said a name, soft, almost inaudible. I didn't ask him about it. I should have. I told myself that love meant trust. Trust meant space. Space meant not questioning every quiet moment or every late-night call or every slip of tension in his voice. I thought I was being supportive. I thought I was being mature. But standing on the fog-soaked dock now with the rusted key cutting into my palm, I realized I hadn't been giving him space. I'd been giving him room to disappear. The fog thickened around me, curling under the wooden planks, swallowing the sound of the water. The world felt suspended, like everything was holding itself still, waiting for me to understand something I'd spent months refusing to see. He hadn't just been overwhelmed. He hadn't just been stressed. He hadn't just needed silence. He had been hiding something. Something big. Something that reached all the way to this empty dock, to the broken zipper pull still warm in my pocket, to the stranger watching me from the ghost-like boat drifting in the fog. And if my instincts were right, if even half of the signals my heart had been ignoring were true, then whatever he was hiding was already on its way toward me. Before the key, before the fog, before the emptiness of the dock and the cold metal of that zipper pull in my pocket, there was my mother. She was the one constant in my life before Evan, a soft place in a hard world, the kind of woman whose love wrapped around you quietly without asking for anything in return. She worked too much, slept too little, and somehow still managed to show up for everything that mattered. On the nights I cried because kids at school made fun of my thrift store shoes, she would kneel beside me and whisper, "You are not what people see. You are what you carry." When she died 5 years ago, I felt something inside me collapse. A foundation, a compass, a voice that used to steady me when life shook too hard. And maybe that's why I fell for Evan the way I did. Fast, open, unguarded. I didn't have anyone left to tell me to slow down. I didn't have anyone left to question the parts of him I should have looked closer at. I only had myself, my heart, my hope, my willingness to believe people were good because my mother had been. The last thing she said to me, lying in a hospital bed with warm lights humming softly above her, was, "Choose someone who doesn't just love you, but protects you." I thought I had. God, I truly thought I had. Evan stepped into my life like the universe answering a prayer I didn't dare to say aloud. He made me feel seen, real, chosen. And when he called me the calm in the storm, I believed him. I didn't realize I had simply become someone he could hide behind, a quiet life he could retreat to when the chaos he created elsewhere grew too loud. Standing alone on the dock now with the fog curling around my ankles and the ocean breathing slow and heavy beneath me, I wished my mother were here. Not because she would have solved anything, but because she would have felt it instantly, the shift in the air, the warning in the wind, the wrongness humming beneath the silence. She always sensed danger before I could see it. I could almost hear her voice in the back of my mind, soft but firm. "Sweetheart, something's not right." My throat tightened, and I blinked hard against the sting in my eyes. I missed her. I missed the way she steadied me. I missed having someone whose love had no conditions, no secrets, no shadows. Evan used to hold my hand and tell me, "You're not alone. You have me." But loneliness has a strange way of revealing itself, not when you're physically alone, but when you're standing in the cold morning fog, realizing the one person you trusted most might have built his world on lies. I closed my eyes and drew in a slow, shaking breath. If my mother were still here, she'd tell me to turn back, to go home, to walk away from the fog and the fear and the warning in the fisherman's eyes. But she'd also tell me something else, something braver, something harder. If you want the truth, you must be willing to walk toward it. And that was the problem, because despite the trembling in my hands and the cold knot in my chest, I needed the truth, even if it hurt, even if it broke me, even if it shattered everything I thought my marriage was built on. I opened my eyes, the fog shifted, the water darkened, and deep in my chest, quiet, steady resolve began to grow, born from the pieces of the woman my mother raised. I wasn't going to leave this dock without answers. Not now. Not after everything the universe had tried to warn me about. I didn't want to move. Not because I was frozen, but because something in the air told me that every step forward would take me further from the life I knew, and closer to a truth I wasn't ready to meet. But the wind kept pushing softly at my back, urging me on, as if the morning itself refused to let me stay still. So I walked, slowly, carefully. Every footstep tapping against the dock felt too loud, too sharp, echoing through the fog as though someone, or something, was listening. I stopped beside a coiled rope left on the planks. At first glance, it looked ordinary, the kind of thing you'd find scattered across any marina. But when I crouched down, I saw streaks of something dark rubbed into the fibers. Thin lines, brownish in color. Old blood. Not much. Barely a smear, but enough for my throat to tighten. I told myself it could have been fish blood. Boats, hooks, nets. Things get messy here. Except the smear was too high on the rope to have touched a fish, and too specific, too shaped, too wiped. Almost like someone had tried to clean it but didn't finish. I stood again, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Fog curled around me like a living thing, brushing cold fingers against the side of my neck. I'd always thought fog was quiet, but today it felt heavy, as though it carried secrets in every shifting swirl. A sharp metallic click echoed behind me. I whipped around, heart slamming painfully, only to see a metal gate swinging shut on its own at the far end of the dock. No wind strong enough had passed, no footsteps had approached it. It just closed, slowly, deliberately, as if someone unseen had slipped through. The hairs along my arms rose, and I took a shaky breath, tightening my grip on the railing beside me. My fingers brushed against a thin line of moisture there. Cool, sticky, not from the sea. Bleach. Why was there bleach on the railing? Why here? Why now? My mind raced through memories I didn't want to revisit. His jacket smelling faintly of it, the way he avoided letting me wash his clothes, the new cleaning service he had switched to without explanation. My stomach twisted. Something else caught my eye then. Something small, barely noticeable. A single silver button lay near the edge of the dock, perfectly round, smooth, shiny. Too shiny to have been there long. I picked it up. It belonged to one of Evan's fishing vests. I knew because I'd sewn a loose one back on last summer. This wasn't that one. This one had been pulled off. The realization settled cold and heavy in my chest. I wasn't chasing shadows. I wasn't imagining things. The traces were real. Someone had been here with him. Someone who shouldn't have been. Someone who didn't want to be noticed. And then came the last signal, the one that made my breath falter. A small, almost imperceptible indentation in the wood, right beside the slip where his boat had been. Fresh, circular, the mark of a heel, a woman's heel, not boots, not deck shoes, heels. On a fishing trip, he said he always took alone. My pulse throbbed painfully. Evan didn't bring women on these trips. Not employees, not guests, not anyone. So why was someone here? And where were they now? The wind shifted again, carrying a faint scent across the water. Something sweet, expensive, lingering, perfume, familiar, wrong, impossible. The woman in the red dress from the gala. A chill rolled through me so violently I had to steady myself on the railing. Whatever story Evan had told me about Peaceful fishing trips. This was not peace. This was not solitude. This was not the quiet retreat of a tired man. It was something else, something hidden, something dangerous, and every sign was telling me the same thing. I wasn't alone on this dock. Not truly. Someone had been here just moments before I arrived, and maybe, just maybe, they were still watching. I didn't notice the cold at first, not the wind biting into my skin, not the wet fog settling on my jacket, not even the ache in my fingers from clutching the railing too tightly. What I noticed was the silence. A silence that didn't feel natural anymore. Not the peaceful, early morning kind, but the kind that comes after something has already happened, and before something else is about to. I stepped backward slowly, my shoes scraping lightly against the wood. The sound made me flinch. Every instinct in me felt stretched thin, pulled tight like a sheet of glass ready to crack. My breaths came shallow, uneven, as though my own body was afraid of making noise. That was when I heard it, a soft, broken sound. Not a gull, not the water, not the groan of the dock shifting under its own weight. It was a whimper, a human one. My heart lurched painfully against my ribs. I spun toward the sound, scanning the fog, squinting to distinguish shapes from shadows. The whimper came again, weak, muffled, as though someone was trying not to cry. Instinct propelled me forward, even as fear clawed at the back of my throat. I followed the sound to a line of stacked crates near the loading area, dark, damp, streaked with salt, and something else that glistened faintly when the fog thinned. My pulse hammered as I approached, each step echoing in my chest. "Hello?" My own voice startled me with how small it sounded. The whimper stopped instantly. Everything went still. For a moment I thought I had imagined it, that my fear had created something out of nothing. But then, a soft rustle shifted behind the crates, the sound of fabric brushing wood. Someone was there. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move closer, even as my stomach twisted into a painful knot. When I rounded the corner, I froze. A woman, curled into herself on the cold dock, arms wrapped around her knees, face hidden behind trembling fingers. Her hair was tangled, wet, sticking to her cheeks. Her clothes were torn in places, smeared with dirt and bruises, dark, fresh bruises. Her shoulders jerked with each shaky breath she took, like the act of breathing itself hurt. For a heartbeat, I just stared at her, because somewhere deep inside, I already knew who she was. The woman in the red dress. The one who had looked at me with pity at the gala. The one whose perfume lingered in the fog like a ghost. She didn't look glamorous now. She didn't look powerful or mysterious or composed. She looked broken. When she finally lowered her hands enough for me to see her face, my breath shuddered out of me. A deep cut split her lower lip. A bruise blossomed across her cheekbone. Her mascara had streaked down her face in black rivers. And her eyes, God, her eyes, held a pain so raw I felt it in my bones, but even through the terror in them. She recognized me. "You," she whispered, voice cracking like thin ice. "You shouldn't be here." Her words stabbed through the fog, through my shock, through my frantic heartbeat. My tongue felt stuck in my throat, my voice swallowed by a fear that was rapidly shifting from confusion to dread. I crouched beside her slowly, trying not to startle her. "What happened to you? Who did this?" Her eyes darted toward the water, toward the place where the dark boat had vanished into the fog. She shuddered violently, her body recoiling as if the memory itself was a blow. Her breath hitched. Then she shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. No, I can't. He'll find me. He'll find anyone who knows." My heart squeezed painfully. "Evan?" The name slipped out of me before I could stop it. Her reaction was instant. A small, strangled sound tore from her throat, and she slapped her hand over her mouth as if to keep more words from escaping. Her whole body trembled, and she shook her head again and again, eyes wide with panic. "That man," she whispered hoarsely, "is not who you think he is." The world tilted. The dock seemed to shift beneath my feet. A cold wave rolled through me from head to toe. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to grab her shoulders and tell her she was wrong, delusional, confused. But the bruises on her skin, the perfume lingering in the air, the fresh heel print, the smear of blood on the rope, the warnings, the silence. My heart knew the truth long before my mind could accept it. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You need to leave before he comes back. He doesn't like surprises." A tremor rippled through me. My husband. The man who kissed my forehead. The man who told me he needed peace. The man I built my world around. Didn't like surprises. I felt something warm slip down my cheek and realized I was crying, even though I hadn't felt the tears forming. My lungs felt tight, my chest too small to hold the fear expanding inside it. The woman reached out weakly, her fingers brushing mine. "You don't understand," she whispered, pain etched into every syllable. "He gets angry when things don't go the way he planned. Angry, not stressed, not overwhelmed, not tired. Angry." And suddenly, the tremble in his hands, the bleach, the silence at the window, the late-night calls, weren't signs of exhaustion. They were signs of control, signs of secrecy, signs of something darker lurking beneath the polished surface of the man I loved. My voice came out barely audible. "What did he do to you?" She closed her eyes, tears spilling down her bruised face. "He did what he always does." For a long moment, she didn't speak. Her breath trembled in and out, like each inhale hurt more than the last. She pressed her forehead to her knees, as if bracing herself for the weight of the memories she was about to lift. I stayed beside her, close enough to show I wasn't leaving, far enough not to crowd her broken edges. The damp wood seeped cold into my skin, but I didn't care. Her silence felt like a wound opening, and every instinct in me whispered that the truth, whatever it was, had teeth. When she finally raised her head, her voice was barely more than a breath. "He didn't start like this," she said. "That's the part that makes it impossible to leave." She swallowed hard, her fingers knotting together. "It always begins so softly. He makes you feel chosen, special, necessary, like he sees a version of you no one else ever has. You think it's love, but it's not. It's selection." A shiver crawled up my spine. Her words slid too easily into the hollow places of my own heart. She stared past me toward the fog-covered water, as if replaying her life on its surface. "We met 3 years ago at a private auction," she continued. "He said he admired my intelligence, my restraint, my ability to read a room." A broken laugh escaped her. "I thought he valued me. I didn't know he was studying me." Each sentence felt like a stone dropping into dark water. At first it was attention, gifts, weekends away. He made me feel safe, like I could collapse in his arms and finally rest. Her voice cracked. But then he started taking pieces, small ones, quiet ones. A comment here, a correction there. Wear this. Say that. Don't talk to him. It never sounded like control. Not in the beginning. It sounded like care. My chest tightened painfully. Those same phrases, soft, harmless, had once fallen from Evan's lips like petals. I had never questioned them. I had thought they meant love. She lifted her sleeve with shaking fingers. Beneath the fabric, faint marks lined her wrist, thin, pale ridges that looked old. Too old. "This started when I tried to stop going on the boat," she whispered. "He told me it was our private space, our retreat, our sanctuary." She hesitated, then met my eyes. But the boat wasn't for peace. Her voice hollowed. It was where he kept the life he didn't want the world to see. My breath caught. What life? Business, she said bitterly. Deals that couldn't happen in boardrooms, meetings that didn't require lawyers, agreements that couldn't be traced, People who couldn't be allowed to talk. Ice spread through my veins. You mean illegal? She blinked at me slowly, as if I had asked whether the ocean was wet. You don't become a billionaire by being clean, she whispered. Not the way he did. He's built on secrets, on silence, on fear. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Fear, like a slow fog, crept into the edges of my mind. But under it, something else stirred. Disbelief tangled with betrayal. It didn't make sense. It made too much sense. What about you? I asked softly, afraid of the answer. Why did he hurt you? Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, she looked almost ashamed. Because I tried to leave, she said. Because I saw something on the boat I wasn't supposed to see. Because I asked a question he didn't like. Because I made him feel out of control. And Evan Prescott does not tolerate losing control. The world tilted under me. My husband's name, spoken with fear, spoken with trembling, spoken as though it belonged to a monster rather than a man, felt like a blade sliding between my ribs. She reached into the pocket of her torn coat, pulling out a small, warped metal object, another rusted key. Just like mine, the same number etched in the metal. My breath hitched. He gave you one too, she whispered. That means he's running out of time. And when he runs out of time, people disappear. Her gaze locked onto mine, sharp with a fragile, desperate warning. You're his wife. That doesn't make you safe. Her voice fell to a trembling whisper. It makes you next. The fog closed in around us like a tightening fist. And for the first time that morning, maybe for the first time in my marriage, I finally felt the full truth of the fear blooming inside me. I hadn't stumbled onto danger. I had walked directly into it. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Not because I didn't want to, but because every part of me felt suspended between two lives, the one I thought I had and the one that had been unraveling beneath my feet without me ever noticing. The woman beside me curled into herself, shaking, whispering broken pieces of warnings and memories that refused to fit the man I loved. But the evidence, the bruises on her skin, the tremor in her voice, the second rusted key, they fit too perfectly with every instinct I had ignored. My heart pounded in my ears, fast, chaotic, terrified. Yet beneath that panic, something steadier began to rise. Not courage, not confidence. Something quieter, sharper, clarity. Fear is strange like that. It can crush you or crystallize you. And right then, something crystallized inside me. I stood slowly, my knees trembling, my breath still uneven, but my spine felt different, straighter. Like some invisible thread had pulled me upright. The woman looked up at me, startled by the movement. You can't go after him, she whispered urgently. You don't understand who he becomes when... But I did understand, maybe not the full truth, maybe not the darkest parts yet, but I finally understood enough. I understood that Evan had two lives. I understood that one of them was built on lies. And I understood that coming here, this morning alone, had placed me directly between them. I turned my gaze toward the water. The fog shifted like a curtain being pulled back, revealing for just a heartbeat the faint ripple of a boat moving somewhere in the distance. My breath caught. The memory flashed. The silhouette, the watcher, the slumped figure. My fear clenched. Hard and sharp, but I didn't step back. He won't expect me, I murmured, more to myself than to her. He never expects me to question anything. The woman shook her head, eyes wide with dread. That's exactly why it's dangerous. He counts on your trust, your softness, your silence. Softness. I felt that word land in my chest like a bruise pressed too hard. Soft was what I used to call kindness. Soft was what he used to praise in me. Soft was what I bent myself into to keep our world from cracking. But now, standing on this dock with the truth bleeding into the fog, I realized something with a slow, startling clarity. Soft did not mean weak. Soft did not mean blind. Soft did not mean breakable. I closed my hand around the key, its jagged metal biting into my palm. Pain radiated through my skin, but I didn't let go. It steadied me, focused me. This key wasn't a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was access. He thought giving it to me would scare me away, push me back into silence, send me home obediently, still blind. He had no idea who I was without fear. I took a long, shaky breath, letting the cold air burn my lungs, letting the truth settle into my bones. My voice came out soft, almost gentle, but underneath it lay something new. Resolve. "Okay," I whispered. "Then let me see for myself." The woman's eyes widened. "You can't." I met her gaze, really met it. My own fear reflected back in hers, but shaped into something steadier now. "He brought me into this," I said quietly, "and I'm done pretending I don't see the cracks in the life he built." The fog rolled across the water, brushing against my legs like a warning, but it didn't stop me. Nothing felt like it could stop me now. Not the cold, not the dread, not even the truth waiting out there on the water. For the first time since I stepped onto this dock, I felt my heartbeat slow, steady, decided. If Evan thought I was too soft to face whatever he was hiding, if he thought fear would keep me quiet and obedient, if he believed I would turn away just because the path ahead was dark, then he had destroyed the wrong woman. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and whispered to the wind. More promise than threat, more truth than fear. "Juk Roy, je toi lam." Fine, I'll handle this. And in that moment, I wasn't scared of him anymore. I was scared of what I might become when I finally found him. The wind cut colder as I stepped back from the woman. My heartbeat had steadied, but my hands still tingled. Half from fear, half from the strange clarity unfurling inside me, like a locked door finally opening. I knew what I had to do, even if the rest of me trembled at the thought. I looked down at the rusted key in my fist. 27B. The scratches, the weight, the bite of the metal against my skin. I wasn't sure which one I felt more strongly, the fear it represented or the invitation it implied. Behind me, the woman shifted, wincing from the pain in her ribs. "If you go after him," she whispered, "you won't come back the same." A small, broken sound rose in my chest, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. "I'm not the same now," I murmured. "Not after what I've seen." I crouched beside her, my voice gentler. "I need your help, not all of it, just enough to walk the path you walked, but smarter." She blinked, tears gathering again. "Why would you risk it?" "Because I loved him, because I needed the truth, because running home would mean living the rest of my life haunted by questions that would eat me alive." But what I said was simpler, truer. Because he underestimated me. Her breath hitched, fear, or recognition. Maybe both. She reached shaking fingers toward her coat and pulled out something small, a torn piece of laminated plastic. I didn't realize what it was until it reflected in the fog-filtered light. A boat pass, Evan's family marina pass. Her photo on it, smudged, bruised, barely resembling the woman before me. Her name scratched out. "You'll need this," she whispered. "They won't question a pass if you walk with purpose." I took it slowly, the weight of it settling on my palm like responsibility. "And this," she added, slipping off her jacket, dark, hooded, smelling faintly of salt, fear, and expensive perfume. I froze. "I can't take that." "You have to," she insisted. "If anyone sees you from a distance, they'll think it's me. They'll think he still has control. You'll be invisible in the most dangerous way." Her words struck somewhere deep. I didn't want invisibility. I didn't want to become a shadow of someone else. But right now, Invisibility was not surrender. It was strategy. It was survival. I slid the jacket on. It hung heavier than I expected, as though soaked not with water, but with everything she had endured. The sleeves were torn, the collar frayed, and the fabric carried a tremor that wasn't mine. Memories, maybe. Pain. Fear. Wearing it felt like stepping into the ghost of a life I didn't know existed. She pulled the hood up over my hair, her touch fragile. Don't walk fast. Don't look around too much. Keep your head low. And above all, never let him see your eyes. He knows your eyes. Goosebumps rippled along my arms. I thought he loved me, I whispered. She gave me a look, not cruel, not dismissive, just deeply, achingly sad. He loves control, she said softly. You were a perfect place to hide the parts of him he didn't want to face. The truth slid into me like ice. I stood slowly, feeling the fabric shift over my shoulders, molding me into a silhouette that no longer looked like mine. The woman watched me, her eyes wide, hopeful, terrified. When you find him, she began. I swallowed. I won't confront him, not yet. Good, her voice trembled. Good, because confronting him means giving him what he wants, your reaction, your fear. I closed my hand around the key again, letting its sharp edges steady me. The world around us seemed to hush, as though the fog itself leaned in to listen. I turned toward the stretch of dock that led to the restricted slips, the expensive ones, the hidden ones, the ones where Evan kept things he didn't want the world to see. As I took my first step, the woman whispered behind me, barely audible, "Be careful. You're walking toward the part of him I barely survived." I didn't turn. If I did, I might hesitate. If I hesitated, I might break. So I kept walking, each step sinking deeper into this strange exchange of identity. Her jacket on my skin, her pass in my pocket, her fear echoing between my ribs, her truth now braided with mine. The fog parted like a curtain as I approached the locked gate to the private docks. I lifted the key, 27B. My pulse throbbed as the metal slid into the lock. A soft click. The gate creaked open. And in that moment, as the cold breath of the restricted marina washed over me, I felt the shift fully, a subtle electric crackle beneath my skin. I wasn't just Evan Prescott's wife anymore. I was a woman walking into the dark to drag the truth into the light. And whatever waited past that gate, his world, his secrets, his real self, I was done running from it. The restricted dock felt different the moment I stepped inside. Colder, quieter, as if the fog itself thickened to protect the secrets hiding here. The planks were sleeker, newer, polished in a way that suggested money rather than fishermen. The air smelled less like salt and more like gasoline and metal, a sharper, sterile scent that didn't belong to open water. I walked slowly, the hood pulled low over my face, the woman's jacket clinging damp against my skin. My breath fogged the air in small, trembling bursts. Every sound felt amplified. The hollow thud of my footsteps, the distant creak of mooring ropes, the soft hum of engines on standby. This place wasn't a marina. It was a hideout. Row after row of private boats loomed in the mist, sleek, black, polished like predators waiting beneath the waterline. Not yachts, not leisure boats. Something else, faster, sharper, like tools designed for disappearing acts. As I walked deeper, my heartbeat tightened, pushing against my ribs. I felt watched, not by a person, but by the marina itself. Then I saw it, slip 27B. My breath stopped mid-air. Even through the fog, Evan's boat was unmistakable. Harbor Light. A silver, elegant vessel that always looked too luxurious for something as simple as fishing. Except today, it didn't look elegant at all. The railing was scratched. The deck was damp with dark streaks that didn't look like water. A torn piece of cloth hung from a cleat, fluttering weakly in the wind. I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't wear and tear. This was struggle. I moved closer, each step heavier than the last. The world narrowed to the sound of water slapping the hull. Soft, rhythmic, unnervingly calm. A cruel contrast to the chaos that must have unfolded here. When I reached the boat, my fingers brushed the metal side. Cold, almost biting. And then I saw it. A smear. Thin, dark, barely there but unmistakable. Blood. Old enough to dull at the edges but recent enough not to wash away completely. The air knocked out of me in one sharp exhale. A voice inside me whispered, "Turn back. Run. This isn't your world. You don't belong here." But another voice, a quieter, stronger one, answered, "You belong here more than anyone. He made sure of that." I stepped onto the deck. The wood groaned under my weight, and a shiver raced through me. I pulled the hood lower, checking the shadows, scanning for movement. Every part of me was vibrating with fear, but there was no turning back now. Not after everything I'd seen. Not after everything I'd been told. As I crossed into the cabin, the air changed again. It was warmer, stiller, and laced with something metallic and something chemical. Bleach. I swallowed hard. Inside, the cabin looked nothing like the cozy space Evan had always described when he talked about peace on the water. No fishing rods, no gear, no cooler filled with ice or his favorite local coffee beans. Instead, the interior was stark, almost surgical. A narrow steel table, folding chairs, a small sink, a locked cabinet smeared with fingerprints. This wasn't a fishing boat. This was a meeting room, a negotiation room, a place where conversations didn't leave witnesses. My pulse throbbed painfully in my temples. On the floor beside the table, I spotted something that froze me in place, a single gold earring. Not mine, hers. The woman in red. My breath stuttered. I crouched down, picking it up with shaking fingers. The metal was warm, as if someone had touched it recently, as if the air still held memory. A dull thud sounded behind me. I straightened too fast, knocking into the table. A chair shifted, scraping against the floor. My heart slammed against my ribs as I scanned the small cabin. Then, a soft tap against the window. I turned slowly. Through the fogged glass, a dark silhouette passed by. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a purpose far too familiar. My lungs constricted. Evan. His walk. His posture. That effortless, powerful stride I'd watched 1,000 times in conference rooms and gala entrances. He was here. On the dock. Now. My pulse exploded. Not ready. Not like this. Not face to face while wearing another woman's jacket, holding her earring, standing in the middle of his hidden world. I backed up slowly, pressing myself into the shadowed corner of the cabin, the hood shielding what little of my face remained visible. His footsteps approached the boat, slow, steady, unhurried. The steps of a man who feared nothing on this dock, a man who owned everything here, including the silence, including the secrets, including the people. My breath trembled out of me, the sound barely audible. He paused on the deck, just feet away from me, so close I could hear the quiet inhale he always made when he was thinking. And in that charged, suffocating moment, one thought flickered through my mind, sharp as glass. The man outside this cabin, the man I married, was not the same man who held me at night, and somehow I had crossed the threshold into the part of him I was never meant to meet. Evan's footsteps became a slow metronome on the deck, steady, deliberate, impossibly calm. That calmness terrified me more than anger ever could. People who rage can be predicted. People who stay this quiet are the ones you don't see coming. He paused near the cabin door. I held my breath so tightly my lungs ached. My fingers curled around the earring still in my palm, squeezing until the metal cut into my skin. The sting kept me present, kept panic from swallowing me whole. Another sound suddenly broke the stillness, a soft thump from deeper inside the boat, followed by a faint, fragile sob. My blood ran cold. Not the woman. Someone smaller, younger, a child. My heart lurched violently. I whipped my head toward the inner cabin door, slightly ajar, barely noticeable in the dim light. The sound came again. A whimper, high-pitched, muffled, frightened. A child was here, on Evan's boat. The boat used for meetings, the boat stained with blood, the boat where he didn't like surprises. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. Why was a child here? Who brought him? What had he seen? Evan moved closer. I had seconds, maybe less. I slipped silently toward the inner cabin, every instinct screaming for me to move without making a single sound. The floorboards creaked under my weight. I froze. Evan stopped mid-step on the deck. The boat went still, like the air itself held its breath. A moment of suffocating silence. Then, he moved again, slower now, searching. I reached the inner cabin door and eased it open just enough to slip inside. The room was tiny, lit only by a sliver of gray light filtering through a porthole. Crates were stacked against the walls. A thin mattress lay in the corner. Too thin, too rough for any adult. A small blanket was bunched on top of it, and curled beneath that blanket, trembling, eyes wide with terror, was a little boy, no older than 6, his hair messy, cheeks streaked with dried tears, a bruise darkening along his jawline, a bruise shaped like fingertips. My heart cracked open. For a second, all I could do was stare, because this tiny, shaking child didn't belong in this world of shadows and secrets. He belonged in a schoolyard, on a playground, in a home where someone kissed his scraped knees and tucked him into bed. Not here. Not in Evan's forgotten place. The boy saw me and recoiled instantly, pressing himself against the wall, eyes full of raw fear. He didn't cry out. He didn't speak. He just shook, like he had learned the hard way that making noise was dangerous. I knelt slowly, lowering my hood so he could see my face. "It's okay," I whispered, voice trembling despite myself. "I'm not going to hurt you." He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared with the haunting stillness of a child who had been scared silent. Behind me, the heavy thud of Evan's step landed on the cabin threshold. I inhaled sharply, instinct exploding through me. I slid across the floor, shielding the boy with my body just as the door to the outer cabin creaked open. I pressed a finger to my lips, leaning close enough that the boy could hear my whisper, "I'm going to keep you safe. I promise." I didn't know who he was. I didn't know why he was here. But the moment I felt his small frame shaking against my arm, something fierce ignited inside me. Something primal and immovable. This wasn't just about Evan anymore. This wasn't even just about me. This was about the innocent life trembling beneath my hands. And when Evan's silhouette darkened the doorway, the truth slammed into me with merciless clarity. Whatever monster my husband was out there on the water, he had dragged a child into it, and I would burn his entire world to the ground before I let him touch that boy again. The outer cabin door swung inward with a slow, heavy creak, a sound so deliberate it felt almost staged, as if he wanted whoever was inside to hear him coming, to fear him coming. The little boy clutched the hem of my jacket, his tiny fingers digging in with a desperation that shredded something inside me. I wrapped an arm around him, pulling him into the shadowed corner, just as Evan's silhouette filled the doorway. He didn't step in at first. He stood there, perfectly still, tall, broad-shouldered, a dark shape carved from something colder than flesh. The fog outside made him appear backlit, a silhouette with no face, only the outline of a man who controlled entire boardrooms with a single raised brow. But here, in the narrow cabin, his presence felt different. He filled the space like a threat, not rushed, not frantic, just patient. A predator who knew the prey had nowhere to go. I ducked lower, shielding the boy's small body with my own, my pulse hammering so loudly I was sure Evan would hear it. My breath shook out of me in tiny, terrified bursts. He took one step inside, then another. The boat didn't creak under his weight. He walked like a man who belonged here, like every inch of this place answered to him. He paused a few feet from the inner cabin door. I felt the boy tremble violently against me, not because Evan was near, but because he recognized the sound of those footsteps. This wasn't a stranger to him. This was the monster he already knew. Evan's voice cut through the air, low, calm, terrifying in its softness. "Come out." Not a shout, not a demand, just a suggestion. The kind that sounded like an order made of velvet and steel. I pressed the boy tighter against me. He whimpered, barely a sound, but it was enough. Evan turned toward the noise. The air changed. It thickened, distorted. He stepped closer to the inner cabin. Through the slim gap in the doorframe, I finally saw his face. My breath caught. This was not the man who kissed my forehead, not the man who loved my art, not the man whose laugh once lit entire rooms. His expression was empty, a mask of calculated stillness, eyes cold, dark, scanning the cabin with the precision of someone inspecting inventory, not people. He wasn't angry, he wasn't frantic, he wasn't confused, he was assessing, calmly, quietly, methodically. And something about the way he tilted his head made my skin crawl. It was the kind of motion a man makes when he already knows the truth and is simply waiting for the lie to reveal itself. He spoke again, soft as a blade sliding from its sheath. I heard something. My throat tightened. Another step. He was close enough now that I could smell him, not his usual clean cedar cologne, but something sharper beneath it. Bleach, sea salt, and the faint metallic scent of fear that wasn't mine. He reached for the inner cabin door. The boy buried his face into my chest, shaking so hard I felt his heartbeat pounding through him like a trapped bird slamming against cage bars. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, a tiny, stolen breath, and made a silent promise. I will not let him touch this child. I don't care what he is. I don't care who he becomes. I don't care what I have to lose. He won't lay a hand on him again. Evan's fingers brushed the door. The hinges groaned. Light from the outer cabin spilled into the darkness where we hid. I braced myself. For discovery, for confrontation, for the moment my entire world would split open. But then, a voice echoed from the dock. "Mr. Prescott, they're asking for you at the office. Something about the shipment report." His hand stilled. He closed his eyes for half a second. A small exhale, controlled, irritated, and let the door fall shut. Footsteps. His, slow, calm, leaving. The deck creaked. The boat shifted. Silence returned, but not relief. Never relief. The boy's tiny hand clung to mine like a lifeline. My knees finally buckled and I sank to the floor beside him, chest heaving with a cocktail of terror and fury. I had seen it now. The truth behind the man I loved. He wasn't tired. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was something far colder, far darker, far more calculated. He was a man who didn't panic when danger was near, because he was the danger. And as I held the trembling boy close, one truth crystallized inside me like ice. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't hide. To protect this child, to protect myself, I would have to face the monster I married, even if it destroyed me. For several minutes after Evan left the deck, I didn't move. Couldn't move. Every muscle in my body trembled from the collision of terror and adrenaline, but beneath the shaking, something colder, sharper, had begun to form. The boy pressed himself against me, his breath hot and ragged against my shoulder. I smoothed a trembling hand over his back, careful not to startle him. "It's okay," I whispered, more promise than truth. "I've got you now." He clung tighter. That small, instinctive trust from someone so terrified, it hit me deeper than any blow ever could. I guided him gently toward the far corner of the inner cabin, where shadows layered thick and dark. I pulled a storage crate aside, revealing a narrow crawl space beneath the boat's inner framework, barely big enough for a child and a sliver of hope. "Hide here," I murmured. "No one will find you, not even him." His wide eyes glistened, reflecting fear and something else. Belief. When he crawled inside, I pulled the crate back into place. My hands shook, my breath faltered, but my mind, for the first time since stepping onto this dock, felt painfully, terrifyingly clear. Evan wasn't here for peace. He didn't come to fish. He came to handle something. Someone. And now that someone included me, I needed to know exactly what he was doing, where he was meeting, who he was hiding, what he was hiding. I stepped out of the inner cabin, pulling the hood low, forcing my breath to steady. The outer cabin felt brighter now, ugly, sterile, exposed. The steel table gleamed with a cold, surgical shine. The faint smear of blood on the deck had dried into a thin, ugly truth. I scanned the room. My gaze landed on the locked cabinet against the wall, fingerprints smudged along the edges, the lock newer than everything around it, as if replaced recently. I crouched. The lock matched the key in my pocket. My pulse quickened. 27B wasn't just a slip number. It was a code to open this. I slid the key in. It fit too perfectly. A quiet click sounded, a terrible, heavy sound. The door swung open. Inside, stacks of documents, sealed folders, flash drives labeled with dates, locations, initials I didn't recognize. A ledger with numbers that didn't look like financial records, but shipments, names, routes. A satellite phone, a handgun tucked into a leather holster, and worse, photos, dozens of them, taken at night, in warehouses, in alleys, on docks, people with blurred faces, some with bruises, some bound, some missing. My breath shattered inside my chest. One photo slipped loose from the top of the stack and fluttered to the floor. The woman in red, her face bruised even then, standing beside Evan, his hand on her shoulder, smiling. My stomach lurched, but the next photo made my knees buckle. A small boy, the same boy hiding beneath the boat, tears streaking his face, a man's arm gripping him tightly. Not Evan's, someone else's. But Evan was there, in the background, watching without stopping it, without helping, without caring. My fingers clenched around the cabinet door so hard the metal bit into my palms. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't stress or exhaustion or business too complex for me to understand. This was cruelty. This was violence. This was choice. Footsteps echoed on the dock again. Multiple this time. Heavier. Not Evan's. Voices. Two men. Talking low. Hurried. Irritated. "Shipment isn't where it's supposed to be. If he finds out, we're dead. She shouldn't have been on the boat. I told you to clean it properly." Ice flooded my veins. They were coming on board. I grabbed the ledger, the flash drive marked with today's date, and the photo of the boy. I shoved them inside the inner pocket of my jacket. Evidence. Proof. A weapon he didn't know I held. The voices grew closer. I scanned the cabin wildly. This wasn't the time for fear. This was the time to vanish. I ducked behind the partition wall just as the deck thudded beneath two pairs of heavy boots. The men entered, their shadows stretched across the cabin floor, their tone casual, talking about the weather, the cleaning crew failing. Something she saw and something Evan needed to resolve. Resolve, a word that tasted like violence. I slipped further into the shadows, silent, breath held tight, hands cold around the flash drive. I wasn't the same woman who stepped onto this boat. Fear had sharpened into something dangerous, something useful. They didn't see me. And as they walked deeper into the cabin, unaware of the woman standing inches from their secrets, I realized something with startling clarity. This wasn't Evan's world anymore. This was mine. Because now, I had something he feared more than silence. I had proof, and I would use it. The two men stayed in the outer cabin longer than I wanted them to. Too long. Long enough for sweat to gather at the back of my neck, despite the cold. Long enough for the tension in my muscles to burn like coiled wire. I could hear them moving, shifting crates, muttering curses, opening compartments I hadn't noticed before. Every sound was a countdown I didn't know the end of. I pressed my back against the wall, keeping perfectly still, the flash drive hidden in my fist like a tiny, sharp heartbeat. I didn't know what they were looking for, but the words "clean it properly" echoed in my skull like a warning bell. They were removing evidence, erasing stories, preparing the boat for the next secret. I had to get them out of here, or I had to trap them here. My pulse hammered. Two choices, neither safe, neither clean. But then, something clicked into place inside my mind, a memory of the woman, trembling beside the crates, and the small, scared child I had tucked beneath the floor, and suddenly, the fear inside me refined itself into something sharper, colder, more deliberate. They needed to be exposed, not later, now, and I could make that happen. I scanned the cabin layout with quick, calculating eyes. The boat had a security system, small, subtle cameras placed high in the corners, meant for surveillance during negotiations. I hadn't noticed them before, but now I recognized the glint of each tiny lens. My breath caught. The system's monitor was embedded in the console on the helm deck. If I could get to it, I could trigger the recording, not just silently, loudly. The audio alert would blare across the entire dock, signaling guards, workers, coast personnel, everyone. Evan's men would be caught on camera inside his illicit meeting vessel, in the middle of tampering with evidence. It would force exposure, force chaos, force a break in the control Evan held over every inch of this place. But to reach the helm, I would need to move past them, silently. And then, the wildest thought moved through me. Not a plan born from certainty, but from instinct. I didn't need to get past them. I needed them to follow something else, something loud, something distracting, something that didn't involve me. I slipped my hand into the broken pocket of the woman's jacket and felt something small and rectangular, something she must have shoved in there in pure survival. A burner phone, cheap, old, still charged. A trembling breath escaped me. I typed one message and left the screen lit. He knows. Then I slid the phone across the cabin floor with a gentle push, letting it clatter against a steel toolbox on the opposite side. Both men froze. Silence. Then, "What was that? You hear that? Someone's here, check." Their footsteps thundered as they rushed toward the noise. I darted the opposite direction, silent as a shadow, slipping out of the cabin and onto the deck. My lungs burned from holding my breath. The fog swallowed me just long enough to climb the short steps to the helm. My hands shook violently as I reached the panel. The security system blinked. Armed, silent, ready. I pressed the emergency toggle. A piercing alarm erupted across the dock. A sharp, metallic howl ripping through the silence like a blade. Lights flashed. Sirens wailed. Automated recording triggered. The men inside shouted, panicked, furious. "What the hell? Shut it down! Who activated it?" But it was too late. The cameras were rolling. The audio was live. Evan's entire operation was being pulled into light he couldn't control. Then, footsteps, not theirs. Heavier. Faster. Evan. His voice cut through the alarm like a scalpel. "What did you do?" My blood froze. He wasn't speaking to his men. He was speaking to the air, to the fog, to the person he knew must be here. Me. For one heartbeat, the world held still. Then another voice shouted across the docks. Security men scrambling, asking questions, rushing toward the flashing lights. My trap had worked. The panic had begun. But in that same heartbeat, I realized something else. I had taken the first piece of power from Evan, the first thread of control. And men like him didn't just lose quietly. If I wasn't careful, I wasn't just risking his empire. I was risking my life, and the small life trembling beneath the floor of his boat. I ducked low, slipping back toward the cabin, adrenaline roaring through me, driven by one single truth. Tonight, the monsters would be exposed. But first, I had to survive them. The alarms kept screaming, shrill, metallic, relentless. Flashing red lights ricocheted off the fog, turning the entire marina into a pulsing heartbeat of chaos. Shouts erupted across the docks as security rushed toward the boat. Footsteps pounded, radios crackled. Someone yelled for backup, but through all of it, I heard only one sound, Evan's voice. He wasn't shouting anymore. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't confused. He was hunting. "Where are you?" His tone sliced through the air with terrifying precision. Calm, level, almost curious. That was the worst part. He didn't sound angry that the alarms were blaring. He didn't sound furious that his men were scrambling. No, he sounded intrigued. My lungs tightened. I dropped low behind a storage crate on the deck, pressing into its shadow, willing myself to disappear. The fog wrapped around me, cold and damp, but it wasn't enough to steady my racing pulse. Every instinct screamed, "Run, now!" But I couldn't, not without the boy. His tiny body stuffed into the crawl space, flashed in my mind like a pulse of terror. I knew too well what happened to people who saw things they weren't meant to see in Evan's world. I couldn't leave him. I wouldn't leave him. I slipped back into the cabin, quiet, careful, heart slamming against my ribs. The boy's narrow hiding spot was still covered. I crouched beside it and tapped gently on the crate. "It's me," I whispered. The crate shifted. A small hand peeked out, then his face, eyes wide, glistening, terrified. "We have to go," I breathed. "Right now." He nodded. So small, so silent, it broke something open inside me. I helped him out, his small fingers gripping mine like a lifeline. He pressed close to me, trembling. I pulled the hood lower over my face and guided him toward the back exit of the cabin. The one Evan rarely used. The one I hoped he'd forget existed in the chaos. But as soon as I cracked the door open, cold air rushed in, and so did voices. 2 security men were running down the dock toward the boat. No time. We couldn't go that way. I swallowed the terror rising in my chest and scanned the cabin wildly, my eyes landing on a small hatch near the floor, one leading to the maintenance duct beneath the deck. Too small for an adult to move through quickly, but for a child and a desperate woman, it might work. I shoved the hatch open. The smell of oil and metal filled my nose. Darkness stared back. I turned to the boy. "We're going through here." He didn't argue. He crawled in first, trembling. I slid in behind him, pulling the hatch down silently just as footsteps thudded onto the deck above us. Inside the duct, the air was thick and suffocating. Metal scraped my back and arms as we crawled. The boy's breathing came in small, shaky bursts. My own breath was loud in my ears. Above us, Evan's voice echoed. "She's on the boat." My stomach plummeted. The boy froze. I placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "We're okay," I whispered, even though my voice trembled. "Just keep moving." We crawled forward inch by inch, the duct vibrating every time someone stepped above us. Sweat stung my eyes despite the cold. My elbows and knees burned from scraping against metal. We reached a junction, left or right. I closed my eyes and listened to the alarms, to the shouts, to the pattern of Evan's steps. Left led toward the bow, trapped. Right led toward the stern, open water. "Right," I breathed. We kept crawling. The duct sloped downward. The metal beneath us grew colder. Finally, a faint glow appeared ahead, the emergency floor light near the engine panel. I pushed the grate gently. It popped loose. Fresh air rushed in, carrying the sharp scent of diesel and the open sea. The boy crawled out first. I followed, pulling him close. The engine room was empty, vibrating with the steady hum of machinery. The stern hatch to open water was only a few feet away, But before we reached it, a voice echoed from above. Not a shout, not a command, just a soft, chilling murmur. I know you're here. Evan. My body locked. The boy whimpered. I held him tighter, forcing my breath to steady. He didn't know exactly where we were, not yet, and that gave me one chance. One. Listen to me, I whispered, kneeling so I was eye level with the trembling child. We're going to run when I say run, and you're going to stay right next to me. Don't look back. Don't stop. Can you do that? He hesitated, then nodded, tears trembling in his lashes. I swallowed the fear climbing up my throat, because this was the truth. I wasn't the woman Evan married anymore. I wasn't the naive heart he counted on. I wasn't afraid of the darkness he lived in. Not anymore. Not when a child's life depended on me. I grabbed the stern hatch wheel with both hands and twisted. Click, creak. Cold air slammed into my face. Run, I whispered. We bolted out into the fog, into the unknown, into whatever freedom meant when you were fleeing a monster. But I didn't hesitate, because for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't running away from the truth. I was running toward survival.